Welcome back to Mental Wellness Evolution. My name is Jeff, and thanks for being here. Today, we're going to get into my first talk in my series titled The 10 Most Valuable Lessons That I've Learned on My Wellness and Healing Journey. Okay, there's going to be 10 topics that I'm going to kind of talk about throughout the course of the next 10 days. They all kind of tie back together, but I'm going to try to put them in sequence as best as I can because one kind of goes into the other and so on and so forth. Okay, so the first thing that I think is one of the most important things that we can ever learn about ourselves and how we operate is the power of the subconscious mind and subconscious programming. Okay, when I discovered this, it was almost like the light switch kind of went off inside of my head, where it started to make so much sense about myself, about why I was the same way, why I was having such a hard time changing my behaviors, why I kept getting kind of sucked back into the same habits and the things that I've always done, and it became such a battle to try to make changes in my life, and I just couldn't understand it. And I'm sure many people that are going to be watching this have experienced a similar type of frustration throughout the course of their lives, and this is going to help you kind of gain a little bit of a window into seeing why this is. Okay, so think of our minds. Okay, our minds operate on two levels. Okay, there's two levels. There's a conscious level. The conscious level is when we're being in the moment, when we're inside of our bodies. Maybe you're watching this talk, you're paying attention, you're observing, you're here, you're now, you're not being distracted by your thoughts, you're in the moment, you're conscious. From that perspective, you can make changes, you can make decisions, you can do things consciously because you're choosing them in the moment. Okay, and now we have the subconscious mind. Now, the subconscious mind operates below our conscious awareness, meaning in a sense that we're not aware of it, okay? And this is important to understand, guys, because they estimate that our subconscious mind governs up to 95% of our everyday behaviors, okay? Think of your brain as a computer. The subconscious mind is the operating system that runs that computer. Essentially, it's the hardware that we've installed inside of our brain. Okay, now your brain is always trying to conserve energy. Okay, we don't have the executive function in our brains in order for us to be present in every single moment of our lives. Okay, it does not have that type of energy. So what it has essentially done is through repetition, we've basically demonstrated behaviors, thoughts, feelings, emotions, belief systems so many times in our lives that they've essentially become hardwired into our brains. Okay, you have in your brain what's called a neurological network. Every behavior that you have, you've established a neurological network for. Okay, now essentially your brain has memorized how to be you better than you know how to be you. It can demonstrate every single behavior that you need to do throughout the course of your day without you being physically present in your life. Okay, when the conscious mind checks out of your life, we get distracted by thoughts. Our subconscious mind is able to actually execute and carry out those behaviors without us being present in our lives. Okay, this is also the part of us that kind of regulates our breathing, regulates our blood, all of those types of things. Okay, we don't have to think about those types of things, they just naturally happen. Now, when we understand this, I call this the robot you, okay? Because we're entirely predictable as people in our lives. We will do the same things over and over and over and over again. And we go about trying to change. And this is where you understand why. Because the subconscious mind is governing the lion's share of your behavior. Meaning you're not present in your life while this is happening. So if the subconscious is present for 95% of your life, the 5% of your life that is your conscious mind is fighting an entirely uphill battle to try to make changes in your life. Okay, this is why we do the same things over and over again. And if we're not conscious in our lives, we're not present in the moment, we are going to lose our ability to choose to this program every single time. Okay, now a perfect example of this, and I'm sure most people have experienced this unless you don't drive a vehicle, is people have been, how many times in your life have you you're driving down the highway and you kind of drift off into thoughts and you got lots of stuff on your mind, and the next thing you know, you're 10 minutes down the road, and you're all of a sudden you snap back to reality and you're like, well, who the hell was going? What happened there? They call it highway hypnosis, but this is what's happening. Is your subconscious part of your mind has taken over, and it can essentially take you through your day-to-day life without you being present in this. The vast majority of the world are running these programs all day long. The second our minds get distracted by something else, immediately our subconscious mind can take over us. Think about this when you've done at work, or when you're with your kids, or sometimes you're even in the middle of conversations and stuff, and you kind of check out, but you're still able to execute all the behaviors. Why? Because you've hardwired that aspect of yourself into your brain. Again, we don't need to be conscious and present in our lives in order for the subconscious mind to execute our behaviors, okay? So essentially understanding that most of us are just kind of walking through our day like robots. We have a system of learned habits, thoughts, feelings, emotions, belief that are literally just governing and dictating every single aspect of our life. And again, a lot of these are below our conscious awareness. We have belief systems that we've picked up since as far back as childhood. In fact, one of the most powerful psychological programming parts of our entire lives is before the age of 7. Now, this has to do with brainwave states. If you're listening to me and you're observing this information, you're in an alpha brain state, okay? It's the analytical part of our mind. It's the part of us that allows us discernment and that we can think and critically, analyze information, okay? We get a little bit lower than that, it's theta. Somewhere on that line between alpha and theta is the subconscious brain, okay? There's also a beta brainwave state, which is when we're absolutely in chaos and things are going on inside of our minds and we're not focused and stressed. That's very likely a beta state. And then delta brainwave states are when we're sleeping. But children, when they're below the age of 6 or 7, are all in the theta brainwave state. So we were all like this when we were kids. So all the original programming and thoughts, beliefs, and everything that we learned as childhood, we learned by modeling behavior. We have what's called mirror neurons in our brain. We model behaviors of everybody else. We learned how we needed to behave in the world, okay? But we take those belief systems and we carry them through into our adult lives. And then we get into our adult lives and all of a sudden, we've got people have picked up, people-pleasing tendencies and deeply held belief systems about everything from money to sex to relationships and all of these ideas that are running below our conscious awareness, but are embedded deeply in our mind as that subconscious programming. So we essentially become predictable in our lives, and then we act in our day-to-day lives according to those belief systems. And then we have something in our brain called the reticular activating system. Now, the reticular activating system looks for evidence to confirm those beliefs in times, okay? So if you have, and one of the most deeply held beliefs that a lot of people struggle with is, I am not good enough, okay? So now your brain starts looking for evidence of that in your day-to-day life. I'm not good enough. Why shouldn't I should apply for that job? God, I'd like to have that job. Nah, you're just not good enough. Or you apply for the job and you don't get it. Bang, there's evidence that I'm not good enough. Oh, I really want to ask that person on a date. I can't because why? Yeah, you asked them out. They said no. I guess I'm not good enough. Okay. So we start to understand, guys, that there's so much programming that goes in, and it doesn't just happen in childhood. We get it from experiences in life. Social media, the mainstream media is a big one. Politicians and everything, they give us these ideas that we subconsciously accept as our reality. And we start running based on what those beliefs are within us. And we're not even aware that we're doing this, okay, guys? This is, like I said, where we have to start working on getting conscious back into our life. We have to start working on the presence and the mindfulness factors. And we're going to get into how to do that as we go through this talk. The biggest thing I want you to understand at this point within this lesson is the subconscious mind. This is what's happening to you. This is why it's so hard to change, because the brain and subconscious, working in tandem as a record of the past, love to take us back to what's familiar. This is the way you've always done it. And then when you start consciously choosing change, now your nervous system and everything starts going haywire, because your body and brain are going, hey man, you're off course, Jeff. You don't want to go to the gym today. You can't go to the gym today. That's going to be very, very uncomfortable. That's not what you've always done. That's not safe. And that's another thing that we're fighting against as we fight against this programming. We have to start to show again our brain and subconscious that new behaviors are actually safe, that it's okay to do things in a different way. But your body and your mind is going to fight against you to the absolute death on this one, guys, because it's a safety thing to the brain. Regardless of how toxic the behaviors in your life are, and you recognize them on a cognitive level, if you're not in your life and present and conscious while you're trying to make change, you are going to lose to the programming. You're going to do things the way you've always done it. I'll take this as a guy who used to drink every day. I didn't have to consciously make a decision to go to the liquor store and buy booze. I just did it. It was part of my programming. I would have been lost in my thought processes the whole time while I went in there, not even necessarily even aware of what I was doing. And yet I could execute those behaviors. Why? Because that was the programming that I gave myself, okay? But the cool thing about this, guys, is like a lot of those neurological networks are very embedded in our brains because we've done things in a specific way all the time. But and actually there's a principle in neuroscience I should mention called Hebb's principle. So every time you demonstrate these behaviors, Hebb's principle essentially says neurons, which are brain cells that fire together, wire together. And the more times that you do the same behaviors over and over and over again, the more you snap those neurological networks, the more they become embedded in your brain. Think of you just walking paths in the snow, okay? But the inverse of Hebb's principle is also true. We can do what's called synaptic pruning. And as we go in a different direction and we don't demonstrate the same behaviors over and over again, essentially those neurological networks start to break up. They start to fall away. And all of a sudden the old programming becomes null and void. It's not important anymore, okay? You think of like the snow starts to fall on those tracks and those neurological networks and those connections in your brain, eventually they break up. I don't have the neurological connections in my brain to go to the liquor store and buy beer anymore because I've consciously chose enough times that my new operating system is that I don't drink. So I don't have that issue, okay? So essentially what we have to do, guys, is we have to learn how to rewrite the programming, and we can rewire our brains, and our brains are amazing things. They have something called neuroplasticity, and what that actually is just the brain's ability to rewire ourselves. Now, we can do this at any age. Obviously, it becomes a little more challenging as we get older, but you can see the plasticity in children. It's insane how fast kids can learn how to do things. But we can do this as we get older. It just takes a little bit more effort on our behalf. But when you start to understand why you're doing the work, why you have to show up all the time, why you have to repeat patterns, essentially we're trying to rewrite our internal operating system. We're trying to rewire our brain to a better future so we don't fall back into the same things we've done in the past. Okay, remember guys, the brain is a record of the past, but if we can start rewiring, eventually what happens when you demonstrate behaviors enough times is you've rewritten that, you've rewired your brain, you've rewritten that internal operating system, and that becomes your now default mode. So instead of, how my default mode used to be, hey, my subconscious programming was that I'm going to go to the gym at a stressful day. Now my subconscious programming goes, I need to hit the meditation couch. I need to hit the gym. I need to go for a walk. I need to do something in that regard, okay? And we'll get deeper into how to go about this as we get through these talks, guys. This is the first talk, and I think this is probably the most important thing that I learned to understand. And when this got clicked into my brain, everything else that came after it just starts to kind of follow, okay? So be aware of your programming. Start paying attention to your patterns in your life. Start looking at how you're showing up and realize that you have to consciously now use the conscious mind to make a different decision. And you can't just do this one time, guys. It takes time. It takes practice. We don't rewire ourselves overnight. We have to be consistent with it. We have to get after it, but it's entirely possible. And it makes showing up to do the work that we know is necessary to rewire our brains, to literally change that internal operating system so that eventually we subconsciously go back to those new behaviors that we've chosen, and we can choose them in our lives, and that is going to help us to actually facilitate real change, okay? And we're going to get into a little bit more of how to do this as we get through these talks. But talk number one, the arguably most important thing I learned on my journey to mentally changing, emotionally, spiritually, all the changes that I've made in my life was to understand the power of the subconscious mind and subconscious programming. And from there, everything else just kind of starts to fall in dominoes, and you're going to start to see as we go through those talks, okay? So thanks again for watching, guys. Thanks for being here. You like what you see, hit the subscribe button. Mental Wellness Evolution. I have my own coaching business, Kyle. You can find me at Remind Yourself on Facebook and Remind Yourself Coach on Instagram and _mind yourself coach on TikTok, okay? Thanks for listening to this talk, guys. I hope you have found it useful. If you have any questions or things that you'd like to know, I coach this, how to do this. This is something that I really think is important for everybody to understand. And if you need guidance as you head throughout this process, by all means, hit me up and reach out. Other than that, I hope you all have a great night, and we'll catch you all tomorrow. Peace.